In the heart of West Africa, a new kind of leader emerged, not from the polished floors of political chambers, but from the rugged terrain of the military. His name, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Young, brave, and rooted in the soil of his people, Traoré rose during one of the darkest chapters in Burkina Faso's history. Terrorist attacks had plagued the land, corrupt leaders had drained the nation's wealth, and hope was fading like dry riverbeds in the Sahel. But when Traoré spoke, people listened. His words weren't filled with empty promises. They were filled with fire, vision, and truth. Captain Traoré didn't come to power through sweet talks or alliances with foreign hands. He came to defend his people. And when he assumed leadership, his mission was clear. Burkina Faso will stand tall, free, sovereign, and African. His first goal was security. He reorganized the military, empowered local defense groups, and cut off foreign influences that didn't serve the people. Instead of begging for help, he urged Burkinabe youth to rise and defend their land. And they did. Volunteers, young and old, came forward, ready to die for a peaceful tomorrow. But Traoré's vision wasn't only about war. It was about dignity. He spoke against the exploitation of African resources by outsiders. Why should our gold benefit others while our people starve? He asked. He encouraged partnerships that respected sovereignty and demanded transparency. His government focused on agriculture, education, and empowering women. Villages began to feel the touch of hope. Schools reopened, roads were built, and local farmers received the support they had long been denied. Across Africa, other young leaders started watching Traoré. They saw a man who was not afraid, a man who said no to puppetry, a man who believed Africa could rise without begging. His speeches went viral. His confidence sparked conversations in Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and beyond. Inside Captain Ibrahim Traoré's vision is a dream of unity, a belief that Africa can solve Africa's problems. He dreams of a day when no African child sleeps hungry, no village suffers in silence, and no leader kneels for his own survival. He calls for African nations to trade with each other, learn from each other, and protect one another. For many in Burkina Faso, Traoré is not just a president, he's a symbol. A reminder that even when the world turns its back, true leadership can rise from within. His story is still being written. But one thing is clear. Inside his vision lies a fire strong enough to light the way, not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa. And perhaps, for the first time in a long time, hope feels real again. That hope began spreading like wildfire, not through official channels, but through village gatherings, market whispers, and young voices on social media. In Ouagadougou, students held discussions under trees, analyzing Traoré's speeches and dreaming of what their own roles could be in the rebirth of Burkina Faso. In the north, where gunshots once silenced laughter, farmers returned to their fields with courage in their hearts. The message was clear. This land is ours and we will defend it, build it, and own its future. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't isolate himself in a presidential palace. He moved among his people. He walked dusty roads. He listened to the elders in the villages and sat with women selling food by the roadside. To the youth, he said, "The real power is not in a gun. It's in knowledge, unity, and belief in our own strength." He invested in vocational schools, sent young people to learn new farming methods, and encouraged a culture of innovation. Solar panels began to appear in rural communities. Women were given land to farm. Young men started local businesses, bakeries, repair shops, small farms. But it wasn't easy. Powerful forces, both foreign and local, saw Traoré's rise as a threat. Foreign companies that once had easy access to Burkina Faso's gold and cotton were now being asked hard questions. "What have you given back to our people?" Traoré demanded. Some international partners withdrew. Media outlets called him a dictator. Pressure mounted. Sanctions were threatened. But the people stood with him. They filled the streets with Burkinabe flags, chanting, "Our future, our choice." Other West African countries began sending delegations to learn from his policies. Mali and Niger, facing similar struggles, opened stronger diplomatic ties. Leaders from youth movements in Ghana and Senegal sent open letters of support. Even some disillusioned African scholars living in Europe returned home, inspired by the idea of an Africa built by Africans. Inside government buildings, Traore brought a new rule: no luxury in leadership. Ministers were told to drive simple cars, reduce unnecessary spending, and focus on service, not status. Corrupt officials were dismissed, and those caught stealing from the people were tried openly. One day, during a televised town hall, a young girl stood up and asked him, "Captain, will we ever be free from fear?" He looked at her and said, "We will not only be free from fear, we will be free to dream. And your dreams, little sister, are part of this new beginning." But Traore knew that speeches alone wouldn't save the country. He focused next on food independence. "If we cannot feed ourselves, we are not free," he said. He launched a nationwide project to build dams, support irrigation, and train local farmers. Markets that were once flooded with foreign food began to stock locally grown maize, yams, and millet. Hunger didn't disappear overnight, but something stronger appeared: the will to fight back without begging. And still, the storm was brewing. Outside Africa, powerful interests watched with unease. Inside the country, there were whispers of betrayal. Traore's enemies knew that if he succeeded, others might follow. He wasn't just changing Burkina Faso. He was daring to rewrite Africa's place in the world. But he remained calm, because deep inside him burned something stronger than fear: a vision. A clear, unstoppable belief that the African child deserves dignity, pride, and a future shaped by African hands. And the story? It had only just begun. The resistance grew stronger. One quiet morning, news broke that a high-ranking official within Traore's own cabinet had been caught secretly meeting with foreign agents. The man had accepted bribes to leak military positions and disrupt food supply chains. Captain Traore acted swiftly. No drawn-out trials, no excuses. The man was removed publicly, sending a powerful message. No betrayal would be tolerated. But Traore didn't stop there. He ordered a full investigation into government contracts. Old names, once protected by political influence, were exposed. Former elites who lived in luxury while the poor suffered were summoned to explain the wealth they couldn't account for. Some fled the country. Others tried to rally opposition from the shadows. Yet, Traore stood firm, surrounded not just by bodyguards, but by millions of loyal citizens who believed in his cause. In the countryside, something remarkable was happening. Farmers formed cooperatives. Local leaders, inspired by the captain's boldness, started building schools from local materials. They no longer waited for international NGOs. Young engineers designed low-cost machines for farming. A group of women in Kédougou developed a shea butter business that began exporting to neighboring countries. "You see," Traore said during one village visit, "we don't need pity. We need purpose." Meanwhile, other African leaders started to shift. In Mali and Niger, military governments began to align more closely with Burkina Faso, sharing strategies on security, food independence, and education. Together, they launched what they called the Sahel Pact, an agreement to protect their land, people, and resources with shared defense and development goals. The African Union, once passive, couldn't ignore the growing movement. Young activists flooded their platforms demanding real change, using Traore's speeches as inspiration. Social media buzzed with slogans like "Africa for Africans" and "Our Land, Our Rules." Music artists began creating songs honoring the revolution. Drummers, poets, and dancers turned markets into platforms for resistance. Yet, outside forces continued to press. Sanctions were placed on trade. International banks froze certain accounts. News outlets painted a dark picture of Burkina Faso, calling it unstable and isolated. But Traore responded with calm fire. "They call us isolated because we are not kneeling. Let them know, Burkina Faso is not alone. We are standing with truth, and truth always finds allies." He reached out to other global partners willing to work respectfully, nations like Brazil, Russia, and India. New trade routes opened. Investments came in for clean energy, agriculture, and mining with clear conditions. The Burkinabe people must benefit first. Inside the classrooms, history was being rewritten. Textbooks now included stories of African heroes, Sankara, Lumumba, Nkrumah. And now, a new name was being whispered alongside theirs, Traore. Still, the captain reminded everyone, "This is not about me, it's about us. If I fall, the vision must rise higher." He launched a leadership training program for young citizens, teaching them governance, ethics, and African history. "The next leaders must rise from among you," he said. "Clean hands, brave hearts." And so, every day, under the burning sun and the moonlit skies of Burkina Faso, a movement continued to grow, quiet but powerful, slow but steady. For this story was far from over. It had only just begun to roar. As the months passed, the winds of change blew stronger. Burkina Faso was no longer just a country fighting to survive. It was becoming a symbol. Across Africa, youth began using a new phrase on social media, the Traore spirit. It meant courage, self-belief, and the refusal to kneel. In Senegal, students painted murals of him with the words, "Africa for Africans." In Tanzania, radio stations played clips from his speeches. In the streets of Bamako, young boys wore t-shirts that said, "If he can fight, so can we." But inside Burkina Faso, the real work was only beginning. Traore had dreams far beyond speeches and rallies. He wanted factories. He wanted power in every village. He wanted children not just to read books but to write their own stories. And so, the People's Industry Initiative was launched. It started small, local processing plants for shea butter, cotton, and mangoes. Women who once walked miles to sell raw produce now had work close to home. Local products were being packaged in Burkina Faso, by Burkinabe hands with Burkinabe pride. And slowly, the economy began to breathe. It wasn't sudden wealth. It wasn't luxury. But it was dignity. In the village of Tenkadogo, a young woman named Awa started a soap-making business with support from a community fund launched by Traore's team. She employed 10 other women. "I never thought I could own anything," she said during an interview. "But now I know we are not poor. We were only made to feel poor." This mindset was spreading. In villages and towns, people stopped waiting for foreign aid. They started planting, building, organizing. Schools hosted local innovation days, where students showed off inventions made from scrap parts, solar cookers, water filters, bicycle-powered machines. Traore visited these events, clapping loudly and encouraging even the smallest ideas. "If you can imagine it," he told them, "you can build it." Still, challenges loomed large. A drought threatened crops in the eastern region. Armed groups tried to retake lost ground, and international pressure mounted daily. Economic sanctions were placed on the country by foreign powers angered by Traore's refusal to follow their path. Aid was cut. Loans were blocked. Foreign news stations labeled him a military strongman. But he didn't flinch. Instead, he stood before the nation on live television and said, "Let them cut what they want. We will grow our own food. We will wear our own clothes. We will write our own destiny." He then announced the launch of Project Sankara, a multi-year national plan to achieve total food and energy independence. It included community farming zones with shared tractors, solar energy farms in all regions, training 10,000 young engineers within 5 years, water harvesting projects in every dry zone. The people rallied behind it. Village chiefs donated land. Elders offered labor. Youth organizations signed up in thousands. Burkinabe flags flew high, and in the cities, artists turned the plan into music, poetry, even street plays. The streets of Ouagadougou buzzed not with fear, but with purpose. But deep in the shadows, enemies regrouped. One night, a trusted security officer disappeared. A shipment of farming equipment went missing. 2 radio journalists were found spreading false reports. The pressure from within was growing. Traore gathered his inner circle. "We're not fighting just bullets," he told them. "We're fighting a war for truth. And we must never lie to the people." He ordered a full investigation. arrests were made, leaks plugged, and yet he remained visible, always among the people, always walking, listening, answering. A boy in Kaya once asked him, "Captain, do you sleep?" He smiled and said, "I'll sleep when Africa wakes up." And so, Burkina Faso moved forward, not fast, not easy, but steady. And across the continent, hearts beat louder with belief. If a small nation in the Sahel could rise, then maybe the whole of Africa could rise too. Then came the night of the storm. It wasn't a storm of rain or thunder, but a wave of violence meant to break everything Captain Ibrahim Traoré had built. In the early hours of a Friday morning, a coordinated attack hit 3 military posts in the north, and at the same time, a power station near Ouagadougou was bombed. Rumors spread quickly. Some said it was foreign mercenaries. Others whispered of betrayed soldiers paid to turn their guns. The air was tense. Traoré didn't run to hide. He went to the national radio himself and addressed the people live. His voice was calm, even though the situation was tense. "My people, we are under attack. But listen to me. This is not the end. This is a test. They want to scare you. Don't let them. Burkina Faso does not kneel. We rise." The streets didn't panic. Instead, something unexpected happened. Ordinary people stepped forward to help. Mechanics offered their garages for military repairs. Women cooked food and delivered it to soldiers. Youth volunteers helped move supplies. A group of hunters from the west sent word, "We will guard our forests. No one enters unless they come in peace." Traoré's enemies had underestimated one thing. The people were awake. By Sunday, the attacks had been pushed back. Some of the captured attackers admitted they were promised money and safe passage abroad. Traoré refused to punish them with death. Instead, he gathered them and asked one question. Was it worth betraying your land? The silence was louder than any confession. But Traoré knew this was only the beginning. The attacks had exposed weak links, internal betrayal, and how far some powers would go to crush a rising nation. So he called for something bigger. A continental dialogue. He sent invitations to youth leaders, thinkers, farmers, soldiers, and elders from every African country. "Come to Ouagadougou," the letter read, "not as guests but as builders of a new future. Let's imagine an Africa that no longer begs. An Africa that feeds itself, heals itself, defends itself, and believes in itself." 1 month later they came. Not presidents. Not diplomats, but the people. A Maasai teacher from Kenya, a cocoa farmer from Ghana, a mechanic from Congo, a fisherwoman from Senegal, a student from Malawi. They filled a dusty conference hall, some barefoot, some in suits, all with burning eyes. They didn't talk about aid. They didn't talk about loans. They talked about land, dignity, unity, and how to pass on the spirit of freedom to the next generation. The world watched. Some in fear, some in quiet admiration. And once again, Traoré stood before them, his uniform plain, his face serious. Africa will not change through speeches. It will change through sacrifice, through small acts of courage. You are the seeds. Let this be the season of planting. And so, a new chapter began. This wasn't just the story of one captain anymore. It was the story of a continent rediscovering its voice. The journey was long, the path was hard, but the fire was lit. And deep in the red soil of Burkina Faso, under the eyes of ancestors and the hopes of unborn children, the dream lived on. The struggle continued. What began as a flicker in the heart of Burkina Faso had become a steady flame across the continent. Slowly but surely, the Sahel Pact expanded. Mali, Niger, Guinea, and even distant Madagascar joined hands in regional trade, education, and defense. The unity wasn't perfect. There were disagreements, setbacks, and hard decisions. But the spirit of self-reliance remained strong. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, now older, with gray forming at the edges of his beard, never claimed power for life. True to his word, he stepped down after 10 years. In a national address, he said, "I was never your king. I was your servant. The struggle is not about a man. It is about a people who decide never to be used again. If I am remembered, let it be as the one who helped you remember yourselves. Burkina Faso held its first truly free election under a new constitution written by its citizens. A young woman, once a schoolteacher, became president. She had grown up during the early days of Traoré's vision. Her voice, steady and filled with purpose, told the people, "I am not here because of luck. I am here because my country believed that even the poor deserve power. And we will not waste this chance." Around Africa, other nations began to reflect. Some copied the Burkina model. Others started by changing school curriculums, adding local history and ethics. Pan-African youth organizations began popping up, sharing knowledge on farming, business, and defending communities from outside control. And though many challenges remained, climate change, poverty, and interference, Africans began to realize they were no longer helpless. The legacy of Captain Ibrahim Traoré became part of African classrooms, folk songs, and street murals. Children spoke his name alongside heroes like Sankara, Nkrumah, Lumumba, and Mandela. Not as a man of war, but as a man who dared to hope. Africa does not need to be rescued, it needs to believe in itself. The path to freedom is not through foreign hands or endless waiting, but through unity, sacrifice, and a return to the values of dignity, self-reliance, and community. True change begins when the people refuse to kneel, when they plant, build, teach, and lead with love for their land and each other. The future of Africa will not be written by outsiders. It will be written by you.